with Nancy and Lisa. We're a mother-daughter team and publishers of BigBlendMagazines.com. And our next guest is going to say, who's your daddy, baby? I think some of us have had that question in life, or sometimes it's just kind of knocking on your door for some reason where you just kind of find out, well, maybe it's not the same daddy I thought. Lisa Pell is the author of The Paternity Mystery, Who's Your Daddy, Baby? And, of course, you can go right to her website, who'syourdaddybaby.com, to keep up with what she's doing. It's always good to go right to the author's website, but, of course, her book is available on Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble, all those great places. And I'm very excited to chat with her because, I think this is something that happens to a lot of us in the world where you kind of find out it's just not the same daddy you thought you had. So, Lisa, welcome to the show. How are you?
Oh, it's great to be here. I've enjoyed listening to all the journeys, and my journey is a little different.
Yeah, it is. But it did have a little travel in there, too.
Definitely some road trips.
Yeah, and a little rock and roll. That's always good.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
With a name like Who's Your Daddy, Baby, you got to have rock and roll.
When I saw the title of the book, my first instinct, it reminds me of the TV show Boston Legal that used to be on, and William Shatner's like, who's your daddy?
That was one of my favorite shows, and I was
I
writing
missed
this
that show
during a lot of times when I was taking a break and watching Boston Legal.
Now, this is interesting because now you actually come from a background of journalism. You've done a lot on radio, TV, and also writing, and which has taken you around the country as well. So now you go into the fiction world. How different is that for you? That's a little journey, too.
Oh, definitely. This book isn't completely fictionalized.
Yeah.
It's based on a real-life story, but I fictionalized it to protect the innocent, the guilty, and the guilt-ridden. So I've had a little fun with it.
And to have a quiet life.
As you can tell. And the real-life story is back in 2005, I was going through in vitro fertilization. It didn't work, but one thing that did happen was they confirmed my blood type was B positive. I knew my late mother's was O positive, and my dad's dog tags said A positive. Well, most of us kind of guess that A plus O doesn't usually equal B. So the French fertility specialist said, I think you better think about the milkman.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
So I went on this crazy...
Milkman's always a favorite.
Yeah, or the Maytag man. Yeah. You've been tagged, ma'am, with the Maytag man. Oops.
Right.
That's quite a trip, though, to have that happen to you personally. I know Nancy has been going through this as well with her family. That nothing is as it seems. And it's kind of shocking, and I think your character in Who's Your Daddy, Baby, Lori, has that, like, what? It's kind of a shaky thing. It kind of rocks your foundation, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. And I deal with a lot of that in the book, but one thing I do want to remind people, it is fiction, and I have changed a few things around. Yeah. It's pretty true to my story, except the names have been changed, and I had to condense a lot of the plot, and I actually changed the structure of the ending, although the real ending is in the book. That's a clue.
Ooh. Ooh. Now, we have to be careful. I'm a blabbermouth. I have to be careful.
No, but I just want to ask you now, when the light dawns as we speak here, that here's scientific evidence, and it's right in your face, your initial response is, no, there must be a mistake, or I knew it, or what?
It was, there must be some kind of mistake. And then I kind of beat myself up over, well, why didn't I figure that out earlier? Because there were clues, but you just automatically, I know you're very close to your mother. I was very close to my mother, and we were best of friends, and I never thought to challenge her about that sort of thing.
Yeah, see, that would be weird for me, and watching Nancy now. Nancy, Nancy's family's a little different. And it's so funny how I call it Nancy's family. I've kind of just walked away from that.
Yours.
Well, it's there, but, I just kind of go, dude, you make choices in your life, But It's fascinating because you really do have that moment of wow, and I think it is kind of, to find out something from your parents, especially if you're close. Like if it was Nancy, it would really blow my mind. It would trip me out, big time.
I think we're more open today now with things. I think there's a generation that consistently lied about a lot of things. And I think the real underlying thing is your parents lied to you. And it comes as a real shock. But then if you can take the emotion out of it, then you realize Santa Claus was a lie. And so there's a...
You did not say that.
So there's kind of you can temper it by saying, well, it's not really a lie if it was done with the best of intentions.
Right.
Well, things have changed so much socially. Premarital pregnancy is no real big deal anymore.
Right.
And that people get married at all and have children is
there's not
no
the
big deal.
Like we don't
It's not
have
the social
to.
stigma it was back in the 1950s when I was born.
Yeah, see, you don't have to lie now.
But talking
back then, I guess, because when I was looking into my own family, which has been more fun than a barrel of monkeys, I think it's hysterical myself, but other people don't take it that way. They are shocked and they get hurt, and I personally find it really interesting. But there's a generation or two that really told a lot of lies most of the time.
Right.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily consider what happened in my situation telling lies. I mean, there were some different contenders, and timing is everything. But and the whole situation was rife with miscalculations, and there were even issues with medical miscalculations. I mean, there are a lot of issues with blood type testing, and there are a lot of issues with blood type mutations.
And even DNA now. I mean, the DNA testing is changing everything, too.
Right, but I think people need to be very careful about relying too much on DNA testing. I mean, people watch NCIS and CSI, and they think, you can solve anybody's identity by doing a DNA test. Well, it doesn't necessarily work that way with half-siblingship testing. It can be very unreliable. It's not considered conclusive in many cases, especially if you come from a small, isolated mountain area like I do from Appalachia, and you can tell I'm from Appalachia because of the way I said it. Most other people say Appalachia.
It's Appalachia. Yeah.
Right. And
you have an accent.
We have. My family came back into the Appalachian Mountains back in the late 1600s, early 1700s, and stayed there. And I can go back just on my mother's side, 13 different ways to a captain in the Revolutionary War, 11 different ways to a lieutenant in the Revolutionary War. I eventually learned that my maternal grandparents were related all the way back. If you went back to the 1600s, I've got a trunk in my house that my ancestors carried over from Scotland back in the late 1600s that still has the newsprint inside, which is fascinating in and of itself. I did a little video of it for my website. But one was descended from the son and one was descended from the daughter, so the names kind of got lost. And there's a lot of intermarriage in the area. People didn't have an opportunity to get out of the area. And transportation was limited at that time.
You really do put a perspective on that because a lot of it, like Nancy said, there's a lie factor, but her family is pretty much that way, so that's where we come from. That, and then people start to believe those stories, but then when you go back to way back in the 1600s, like you're talking, things were done, and there's like the protection part of it, but when you think about Appalachia and Scotland and Ireland, there is a big connection. I mean, even when you go back in music, to me, the music part always connects for me. Just when you start looking at areas and immigration and where people ended up, the Appalachia. I mean, look at the music that comes out of there. and the
Oh, I
story.
know. My brother-in-law is a professional banjo player, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, and it
I
comes
honeymooned
from that
in Ireland.
See?
Well, it's interesting. Life moves too fast
But-
a lot of times, and there's periods where, you can look back on those times and go, well, it was slow moving. But when you look at, in reality, things have changed so much since those times. We're on the fast track.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't always think before they do things. Gee, go figure. And so when you're trying to go back and source out what you went through, like trying to find out all these details, and you're going from letters and files and documents and things that can or cannot make sense. Like this letter said this, and it could mean this, and it could mean that, but it could mean that, and it could mean this. It's like kind of like chasing your tail in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the love letters I found from a character I called the Purple King, who
yes.
was a potential paternal contender, and he was deceased by the time I found him.
I know.
That is just
we're just,
so funny.
Just for the sake of our listeners, we're trying not to give away anything.
Yeah. But,
right.
I mean, a potential paternal contender. I love this.
Well, I've had a lot of fun with the color purple. And that fits in perfectly with Big Blend Radio, because it's red and blue.
Oh, sorry.
The purple blend.
Yeah, but that's what it's all about. Everybody does blend together.
Were you upset when you found out? I mean, were you I know, I found out, I just have to say this, I found out from my first indication was applying for a job, getting the job, going home and being told you can't take that job, and wondering why, and then finding out later that my dad had 3 wives at the same time.
Oh,
and
my Lord.
So now the rest of the family don't want to talk about it, doesn't want to know, but I know that that's what happened. So, but it was like it was like you ran into a brick wall.
And Lisa, this is when your book came in here saying, "Who's your daddy, baby?" Nancy grabbed that book and ran.
Yeah. Well, I wrote it to be helpful to other people.
There's just this continual denial
mm-hmm.
in my family that anything like that could have happened, and I'm sitting here with birth certificates and everything. And so it's just funny. It's just odd.
Right.
It's just, I don't know how to put it.
I think when my mother realized she was pregnant and not married, there was quite a bit of denial going on there.
Yeah. How'd that happen?
Right. Well, I think she knew. But,
right. Yeah.
But she didn't want to tell her mother. And you talk about how life has changed so much since colonial times. Just in my own generation, when I think about my grandmother, who never learned to drive a car and grew up, she was born in 1899, and the things she saw in her lifetime, from riding around on horses to riding around in cars to riding on an airplane, I think she would be astounded by the Internet and all of the different avenues I used to conduct a search. It would be unfathomable for
that's what
people of that generation.
Interesting. You bring Facebook into it, and it's so funny because I remember one of the novels. It was a couple of years ago, and somebody was talking about Facebook, and the whole story kind of based off of it. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is just where we're at now, where Twitter and Facebook and iPads are now in novels, But it's true, Facebook has got that whole part of it where you do reconnect. I've connected with friends when we left South Africa. A lot of people all had to leave South Africa at the same time, and none of us really knew where we were all going or what was going to happen and if any of us were even alive. And through Facebook is truly how we actually started to reconnect and know we were all alive and, hey, we're all doing good, And so it's interesting how that plays into your story personally in your novel, too. It's interesting.
I find Facebook fascinating, the way you reconnect with people and can keep in touch with people. It's just amazing to me. And Twitter, I'm just getting on to that one. I've only been doing that for about a year. and it's wonderful. It's a fantastic way to meet new people. Yes. Well, I always say that Facebook is to connect with people you already know, people who are your friends. Twitter is to reach out to new people, and then LinkedIn is your professional contacts. And now I'm getting into Pinterest too.
You could do a whole Pinterest family tree that way.
You could become a junkie.
You have to be careful not to let this take up too much of your time.
Right. Going back, and I want to go a little bit back into the history of really getting into your family roots, because going back into like the 1600s Appalachian area and that whole region, because there is an amalgamation of different cultures that come together. It's like going to Louisiana is the same kind of feel to me, and Appalachia, I mean, how much was, we were talking about a few newspapers, but how much was written down? How much was oral story? How much when you think about newspapers even, I know that you were in the newspaper industry as a journalist. How much of it was always true,
Oh, every iteration of a story can be changed with just who told it. And what they write down for official history isn't necessarily always the full story. But I was fortunate that my family has kept a lot of written records and had a lot of family Bibles, and a lot of people wrote down stories, and they didn't write down as many as I wish they had. I mean, I can still remember my grandmother telling some stories. I wish I'd taped her. I wish I'd taped my mother more. But there's a whole culture where you respect your ancestors. Every year we go to a ceremony we call Decoration Day, where we put flowers on the graves of our ancestors. And these stories have been orally handed down. Fortunately, a lot of my family, they were teachers, so they knew how to read and write and wrote a lot of it down. I find it interesting, though, that you bring up the mix of cultures. One of the real surprises to me when I was going through all this was learning about different genetic mutations, all that sort of scientific stuff that was like, oh, my God. But
a weird image just popped in my head when you said that.
Okay, you have to explain that one.
I'm mutating right now.
Right. Well, it was explained to me that every body at the point of conception goes through like 1 million different mutations. When I was going through the in vitro process, they tested me for a variety of mutations that might be leading to all the miscarriages I was having. They found one that only 1% of the population has. It's an inverted number 9 chromosome, and they think it leads to egg and sperm incompatibility. Wow. Well, I was in the midst of all this search, and at that time I thought maybe this Swedish dentist might be my father. I was thinking, well, rare gene, all those Swedes up in Scandinavia, maybe that's pretty rare. But it came back that it was actually African American.
Wow.
And that was kind of a surprise. And I read some more about it. One of my George Mason University professors has written a study called Very Slightly Mixed, which is an incredible title. And it talks a lot about how we now have a lot of genealogical records on computer, and we're able to see all these interrelationships between families, and we're able to see that back in colonial days, a lot of intermarriage with Native Americans and colonial white settlers was going on that wasn't necessarily documented. There also is this legend.
Welcome to my family.
Exactly. There's also this legend
I'm sorry, we're not allowed to say anything because apparently our side of the family doesn't want to acknowledge that, because that means we're non-white. So that's part of the issue of trying to find this information.
Well, a lot of people, it was dangerous to be classified as non-white back then. I mean, think of how terribly we treated people who were non-white.
Absolutely.
And, I mean, it's a disgrace. But there was a whole legend about people called Melungeons. They allegedly were Portuguese sailors who shipwrecked off the coast of the Carolinas and made their way to what was then the wilderness, which was Appalachia. And later on they talked about, well, maybe there may have been some Moorish slaves along with them. Well, in my family, my mother, back in the 1970s, we found out she had Mediterranean blood platelets. And we were like, where did that come from?
Oh, wow. So now you have GPS on your blood.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So it was like all these English, Scottish, where did the Mediterranean thing come in? And people told us about the Melungeons. Well, there's a little bit more to the Melungeons. Here's another little quirk in my story where a lot of the Melungeons actually were African American, escaped slaves, and people wanted to avoid classifying themselves as non-white, so they kind of fudged the records.
You know, but this happened in South Africa too because of the Portuguese influence and then the slavery that was also going on.
There was a lot of things going on that nobody wanted to admit to. Even our forefathers, they played around with slave girls. We all know that now. Okay, and so, you know, if everybody just goes right to DNA testing, at the end of the day, you're going to find out we're all related and inbred.
Well, but this is really interesting too, Lisa. This is absolutely it is a small world. Seriously, a friend of ours, we were talking one day, you know, having a glass of wine, and we started talking about, you know, Nancy's history, family history. Okay, yes, mine too, and. You know, we actually have figured out that there's a really good chance we're related, a very good from the Scandinavian side. And you were talking about, you know, the DNA. Oh, wait a minute, I could be related. You know, the Swedish, you know, dentist may be one of your prospects here, your paternity prospects, right? Well, Nancy's got what's called Viking's disease on her hand, which it's kind of like a
your tendons shorten.
Yeah, your tendons shorten. So, and it's known as Vikings, the Norwegian thing. And so we're like, okay, well then that makes sense with the Norwegian side. And you start going by all these things, you know, and it's fascinating. But we actually have come to this point of between the Scandinavian side with our friend and even the German side, we're realizing that there's truly a point of us being related, and none of us are living anywhere close to where we're from. How about that?
It's amazing. Well, I mean, if you look at the biblical and evolutionary theories, we really are the same people. It's just a matter of degree. And a lot of us are a lot closer than we realized, and people need to get over it, I think.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say when I say we're all connected. You know, I'm not doing the woohoo thing. You know, I'm seriously saying that if you trace DNA back far enough, and I mean, there's just too many people doing too many things. Seriously, that eventually you're going to find you're connected to a whole lot more people than you thought. And not everybody told the truth about connections. Let me put it that way.
Or maybe they didn't even know the truth about connections.
Well, yeah, I mean, it just is what it is. So at the end of the day, I find it really interesting. I know for some people it's emotionally upsetting. For some people it's a big relief. You know?
Right.
I don't know.
Do you find that even like your character, Lori, I think you're going to have to come back on a show. You know, Lori, seriously.
Oh, I'd love to.
I want to put you on with our family history guy, and I think we should just have a big family powwow. Can I call it that? I'm going to get in trouble. But
that sounds
I would
wonderful.
love to have a show where we actually talk about all these stories because there's so many of us, and I think what's great about your book is, and the title is just right to the core. I mean, who's your daddy, baby? I mean, as soon as Nancy saw that, I mean, both of us went, you know, we're all.
Do you want to hear a little story about how I came up with the title?
Yeah.
I was initially calling it just "Who's Your Daddy" as I was writing it, and then I looked up who'syourdaddy.com on the internet and saw that it was a porn site.
Yeah.
And suddenly all these hookers started following me on Twitter. And I thought, well, we better not go there. And so I decided to add the word baby, and that really was the crux of the story anyways, because
Yeah.
I was inspired by trying to have a baby, and when that didn't work, the baby became my book, and then it's a story about me becoming a baby. So the baby thing works.
Mhm. Well, and who's your daddy? I mean, we're talking sugar daddies here, so it's different.
Yeah, I mean, I still hear William Shatner. Who's
your daddy?
I mean, who's your daddy? Yeah, but I think definitely we should do a whole show on this because everybody's going through this, and I think even the era that you're talking, being born in the 50s, it seems to hit that zone and go forward from there. It seems that, the war was over and everybody became hippies overnight. Not that,
well, you had the Elvis generation there that learned to rock and roll, and my mother loved Ray Charles and Little Richard and Fats Domino.
If you go back in history, even the popes did the dirty.
Fats Domino.
No, seriously.
That's what Blueberry Hill was all about.
No, people are people, and you can put all these rules out there, but people are going to break them, and the results are the results. And, rules sometimes don't coincide with human behavior. That's the way I choose to put it.
Yes. Yes.
I think you're a very wise woman.
I have to agree with you. She's sitting right here. She's my mom. No, but Lisa, this is a cool thing. You've got some great YouTube videos that are totally different than what you normally see attached to a book. And, people can get them through your website, YouTube as well. You type in Who's Your Daddy Baby. Put the baby on the end and check it out. And yeah, really.
So you'll have to clean your computer.
Yes. Yeah, really.
And I've done some music videos that are really a lot of fun. I've got cats and dogs that are reading the book, and another music video I've got toddlers singing and dancing to the ballad of Who's Your Daddy Baby, and I was fortunate to have a friend who's a wonderful soprano, so the rest of the world didn't have to listen to me sing. And we had a lot of fun with some professional musicians, a guy named Tom Saputo. It was really a fascinating experience just pulling all that together. And I'm still working on some more songs. We may try to turn this into a musical. Who knows?
Oh, cool! I think
awesome.
it'd be a great musical.
Maybe it'd have to be Papa Mia instead of Mama Mia.
You could do Who's Your Daddy Baby monologues.
But really, it would be fun.
I think so. I think
it could make a TV series.
Yeah, and even the beginning of your book, the very start of it, you could start. I mean, that's theatrical in its beginning, right there. So I want to say this though. Who'sYourDaddyBaby.com. Everyone can get it through there. Go read, and connect with the author. I always say, please connect with the author directly. It's interesting and it's just a better connection. But I want to know, are you going to do something else after this? Are you going to write another book?
Of course. I was actually working on a novel when all this occurred, and I realized it was too long, so I split it up into a trilogy. And I think this winter I'll sit down and try to smooth all that out and pull that together.
How long did this take? Who's Your Daddy Baby?
A lifetime.
Because I know this is a journey. I mean, but if you think from day one and even just the journey part of it to now, and it's out, you've given birth now to it.
Right. The birthing of my baby here took about 6 years. That's a pretty long gestation period for humans.
Yeah.
Hey, but
I'm sure your mother would be horrified to think of a six-year gestation period.
Yeah. God, that's longer than an elephant. But just check out how many lead men you could interview for the father.
Right.
Ooh, just to think about
You could have a whole series of Who's Your Daddy Today?
Yeah.
Knock, knock. It's a series of knock, knock jokes.
It would make a great TV series. It would be something different.
I think it'd be great.
I should go knock on doors with that.
Yeah, I love it.
That could be fun.
I
see it. I could see it really
Me
clearly.
too.
Wow. And then on the side, you work for the government. This is a trip. You're great. Okay.
Well, I work for a company that has a contract with the government, so I'm not actually a government employee.
Okay, yeah, because it's funny because Homeland Security watches our Champagne Sunday show, except for they I know nobody wants to hear this, but except for they kind of miss out on our Rants, Raves, Rock and Roll show for some reason, and I don't know what. then you know.
Doesn't
But
surprise
hey,
me
no,
at
it's
all.
all good. It's all good. But I think this is really amazing what you've done, and I think it's opened a can of worms for everybody across the country. So that's what I think. And we're going to do this other show. I'm going to be in touch with you tonight or tomorrow morning. Okay?
Wonderful.
Awesome. Lisa, good stuff. Who's Your Daddy, Baby, everybody? Get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's by Lisa Pell, and she's got her name's Lisa, so she rocks. So there it is. And, of course, go to who'syourdaddybaby.com, and she's on Facebook. We have to connect on Facebook and Twitter. So go check her out. What's your Twitter name?
At Lisa Pell.
Oh, well, gee, that's easy. At Lisa Pell. Check
Not
it out.
at Who's Your Daddy?
No. I think she learned that lesson. All right. Thanks so much.
I was scared
for
to do
joining
that
us,
one.
Lisa.
Okay. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I want to do this family history show. I think this would be great, and we'll open some more cans of worms and get into it, because I also want to talk about the Appalachia a little bit further and the different cultures there. It's cool. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great evening.